Welcome to another weekend here on the platform. My name is Sam Omatseye. My column will be read to you shortly.
Then IBB decreed, "Let Akwa Ibom be," and the state was burned. Before then, it was a place, a people, and a culture. Yet, in the Nigerian project, they were an echo of the words of Nehemiah the prophet. It seemed they had no portion, nor rights, nor memorial in Nigeria. 34 years after a military decree breathed it into being, it is no longer the backwoods and backwaters in the Nigerian imagination. When it became a state, its people had their pride back, their culture asserted its grace and fortitude, and it could now eat not only humble pie, but its big fat alternative, oil wealth, and the fruits of its entrepreneurial ferment. So, the state marked its anniversary recently when the Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, came calling to inaugurate two projects, all under the quintessential Akwa Ibom word, Dakada. The first is the flag-off of the construction of a low-density estate in tune with the influx of outsiders to the state, a testament to growing prosperity and the state's rising cosmopolitan profile. Governor Udom Emmanuel had also built high-density and medium-density ones ahead of this highbrow offering. The second is the Dakada Towers, a 21-story edifice billed as the smartest in the country, complete with space, elegance, comfort, and gadgetry. While I beheld the towers, I sighed. Akwa Ibom has moved from a speck to a spectacle, or even the spectacular. It is not a dirt but a juicy toad, now doted on. As Governor Emmanuel has noted, he would not allow paucity to cow or derail him as he pursues what he calls the completion agenda, which entails more project commissioning week after week till the end of the year. Critical to this is the creation of what is growing as state capitalism, where the government is upending the classical lie that commerce is only the province of private endeavor. Governor Emmanuel has set his own model in motion in the coconut refinery, meter factory, syringe factory, toothpick factory, and of course, Ibom Air, furnishing the needs of many of these products that we import and drag down the value of terms of trade and currency. This is not the Akwa Ibom of 34 years ago, but one which is after the image of its pilot today, trying to modernize without losing its cultural identity. It is a state that still looks forward in tune with the words of the same prophet Nehemiah, "Arise and build." That incidentally rhymes with the meaning of the word Dakada, arise.
Welcome to Big Talk. My special guest today is Wale Adeoye, a well-known journalist, writer, and political commentator. Thank you very much for coming today.
Thank you.
This is a special Independence Day edition. We saw that it was not a day of celebration. We saw protests in parts of the country, especially in Lagos and Abuja. You know, revolution now and all of that. What does that tell us tell about us at 61?
Well, it tells a lot of stories about us, both positive and negative. For the fact that people can go on the street to protest, it's a plus for us. That we are no longer under military dictatorship, that people have the right to express themselves. Then we also have to look at the fact that what are they protesting for? It means that there are still many unresolved issues that are plaguing the country, and that these issues are burning issues, and people are anxious to express themselves, to let the people in power know that not everything that they expect the government to have done, not all their aspirations have been met. And I think when we are talking about Nigeria, we have to look at it subjectively and objectively. Subjectively in the sense of how it affects us as individuals. If we want to do that, If you are a minister, if you are rich, you may think, oh, the country has been a blessing since 1960, that you have triumphed over tribulations. But if you want to look at it objectively, and I think we owe history the obligation to analyze the country objectively, in the context of objectivity, to look at how the country affects other people, irrespective of our own biography. So I think if we look at it that way, we realize that even though the country has made progress, we can't deny that, in terms of education, in terms of transportation, in terms of commerce, in terms of population growth. For instance, in 1960, Nigeria was just about some 45 million people. Now it has grown by almost 300%. We are talking about 200 million people. We are talking of about 1,000. Yes, yes. We are talking about over 1,000 medical doctors in 1960. Now we are talking about over 37,000 doctors. We are talking about people traveling, for instance, from Warri to Lagos in 1960. Probably will take you about three days.
3 days
or 4 days.
I remember Chief Harriman telling me that when in the 40s or so he was going to Government College Ibadan from Warri, and the journey was forever.
You have to stop on the way,
and then the kind of vehicle and the kind of roads.
Yes.
It was just, sometimes we take for granted the progress that has happened over the course of the years. I remember too that when we were transferred from Lagos to Warri, as my parents, in 1970, we left very early in the morning, and we didn't get to. We didn't get to Warri about midnight.
So I think we made progress, even in terms of communication. In 1960, you need to write letters and probably wait for about 3-4 weeks, for the letters to get to your parents. And then in 1960, we had just, I think, 2 universities, University of Nigeria and Nsukka, and University of Ibadan. Now we are talking about 43 federal government universities and about 79 private universities. If you are looking about, there was no private radio in 1960. Now we are talking of Lagos State alone having almost about 36 radio stations. So I think we've made a lot of progress. We can't deny that. But also, in terms of the quality of life, in terms of having a national leader that can address the fears and aspirations of the people, in terms of national cohesion, in terms of having a leader with capacity, with intellectual strength to actually deal with the problems that are confronting us, I think we still have a long way to go.
Yeah, the thing though is this, it's what some political analysts call growth without development. And they say, no, we have all of this. We have radio stations all over the place, but we are not given enough opportunities to express and even tell the stories that we're supposed to tell. We have roads all over the place, and we still have accidents and potholes and so on all over the place. We have airlines, and only the rich can fly. We have education all over the place, and the standard of education is nothing near what it was in the 60s or 70s and so on. So it looks like we look like a full-grown man who is still like a child. It's spectacle, it's impressive, but the content is empty.
So we are talking about development of the human person. Because it's not just about infrastructure. It's not just about tall buildings. It's about the quality of the human mind. So I think when you look at this, we have a lot of challenges. Take China, for instance. In 1960, we were almost at the same level in terms of life expectancy, about 45 years. China now life expectancy is about 77. Singapore, that got independence in 1965, life expectancy is about 77 years. In Nigeria, it was 45 years or about 41 years in 1960. Now it's about 55 years. So the quality of life, has not been able to measure up to the 61 years, and of course there are new emerging threats to our livelihood. We are talking about insecurity. We are talking about terrorism. Nobody ever imagined. I think the best scholars, military scholars in 1960, would never have been able to predict that Nigeria will have suicide bombers. But today we're having a lot of threats, a lot of armed non-state actors who seem to be performing the functions of the state by imposing taxes, imposing levies, and also even enforcing laws, including death penalty on the citizens. So I think we have a lot of fundamental challenges that are yet to be resolved. In search of a country, we still have a long way to go. In search of nationhood, we still have a long way to go. So we don't have that kind of national leader with a national vision that can create cohesion, that can create a national philosophy that unites all of us together.
Now, in the 60s, when Nigeria became independent and so on, there was a lot of optimism. The British were going, our leaders were going to take over. We had what we call the parliamentary system of government, and people thought that, well, since we have come on our own, things will get better. But then before we had the Western region crisis and the whole issue of wet here and all of that, we also had a situation where people quickly, within a couple of years, started talking about the standard of living and the fact that wages were not doing well and they were not going the way they should go. And there were national strikes where people said, the nation could not continue the way it was. And the Western region crisis came. And when that one came, it snowballed into a national crisis, and eventually the soldiers came in. And that led one thing to the other, and we had a civil war. So that was a decade of optimism and tragedy. But then the 70s came with a burst of enthusiasm. One came that the Civil War had ended and said no victor and no vanquished. And after that, there was a sense that, okay, now that we have now counted our dead and we're all trying to come together as one country again, let us build a prosperous people. And it seemed to be so over a few years where we had the blooming of some of our greatest crops. There was oil. Then there was the Granite Pyramid. Then we were teaching some countries how to get their palm products. Malaysia and so on. We were teaching them all of that. Then suddenly the Nigerian corruption came in. We had the cement armada, there was corruption, and then one lasted a few while, and then there was a lack of grip to the system. And there was the Muritala coup, and people thought, well, this may be better, and then it was there for a few months, and it was flushed out, but the coup was stopped. Where the Obasanjo wanted us to go to civilian rule, and we're still thinking that, well, maybe we could still save this country. We went to civilian rule, Shagari became president, and Shagari becoming president itself became another burst of corruption. We seem to be going back at even a deeper level to the problem that led to the Civil War in the first place. And people were afraid that Nigeria was going to go down the precipice into the 80s. And then the 80s led to another coup that brought the Buhari into office, and then was accused of naivety, ineptitude, and all of that. And we had the gap-toothed man, IBB. This is still in the 80s, and that one led to real issue of the blossoming. Some people said that corruption was blown open, and the Naira, for the first time, started to suffer a terrible fate. There was one time, I remember, that we had a meeting. I was doing my youth service then, and the people were all astounded that the value of the Naira was now 4 to $1. And people were saying, 4 to $1, that was actually a scandal. Yeah. Today is almost 600, to $1. So that was 60s, the 90s. We thought we could do anything. We had June 12, and then the country went on another democratic spiral, and the issue of ethnic and North and South, Christian and Muslim, came front and center to a country who thought they were innocent of that kind of open adversarial relationship between both faiths and both regions. and so on. So we started to see that. And then went to the 2000s, and the stories have gone down now to terrorism, and now to reopen ethnic fight. And only last few months, we saw the southern governor saying, this presidency must come south, and the northern governor saying, please don't bring that, we don't agree with you, and so on. So tell me, given all of this decade by decade analysis, and the decade by decade analysis may be simplistic, but it's just one simple way. You know, I want to put all of this in context, and then we say, okay, how do we now put all of this in a few sentences and explain that this is the problem that we have gone through, this is how we as a people and as an elite have decided we are going to move forward?
I think we have suffered the fate of what I call tragedy of leadership. Because there was a foundation laid, by the British administrators that had the tips on their tips the history of our country. In 1939, Bernard Bodilon formulated the idea of federalism, and it was borrowed by the founding fathers, from the founding fathers, George Washington, Hamilton, and the basis of federalism is that, to encourage community inclusion in political economy, to avoid tyranny of one party over the other, and also to use the states as laboratories of experiment so that there could be mutual competition. And this was the basis of the 1960 Constitution. But unfortunately, this was distorted in 1966. And since that time, Nigeria has been passing through high and low lands, most of the time passing through rugged hills. That we have been able to survive this tough terrain is a mystery. So I think we distorted the foundation of the house, which was that recognizing our differences and allow people and communities to develop based on their civilization. Look at India, for instance, that is almost similar to Nigeria in terms of the plural nature of the society. Yeah. India has about 29 states, and then they have what they call autonomous territories. Even Russia, after running a communist state for over 70 years, they have about 129 ethnic groups. The Russians are about 77%. But they still have autonomous communities that are made up of indigenous people. In India, for instance, you have states that are just almost 200 million, like Pradesh. And you have smaller states like Sikkim that are just about less than 1 million people. And yet they are equal partners. But in Nigeria, states were created without consultation with the people. They just surgically divide the states irrespective of where those people that own the land really want to be. And that's why you see some states where they have almost about 3 ethnic groups merged in one state without consultation. No state has ever been created except the old Bendel state that was created through the parliament. Other states and local governments were created by fiat. No consultation, no discussion with anybody. So, and you see, through this process, we're able to sow the seed of, turning those states into atomic society in perpetual conflict with itself. So I think we messed up the foundation of the country. We want to build the house from the rooftop, and it's really going to be very difficult. So we need to go back to federalism, the founding philosophy that was put together to be able to build a prosperous and happy country. Unless we do that, we'll be going from one difficulty to the other.
Do you get the sense that our elite, who have also been working over the decades to put this country together, are they beginning to lose it? Because I got that sense from this argument over whether the presidency should come north or south and so on. That issue never really addresses the issue of whether education will be better, or whether we need better health care, or better road, or better better food on the table. It doesn't address it, but it is something that seems to even threaten everything.
Yeah, I think it boils down to incompetence on the part of leadership. If a leader is very good, let's say for the past 6 years or since 1999, we've been having a succession of good leaders. People will care less about where the leader comes from. But we have a situation where, people come to power and what they want to do is to run that affairs as if it's for their own ethnic groups alone. So people are beginning to ask questions that if you want to turn Nigeria to private property, to use it to further your parochial interest, then people have to ask you to give up. That, they also need to, to have a taste. So I think what is giving rise to this is because we don't have competent leaders. We have, continuously have leaders, that wants to turn the country into personal property to, serve the interest of their own ethnic groups alone. I think it has become more pronounced in the past 6 years, which is quite unfortunate.
And what do you think is the way out now, given the fact that some people are looking towards 2023 with trepidation, say, oh God, I hope this country survives this next 2 years. I hope we will still become one country.
Well, I think what is important is for the people to be able to make a choice and for the people to make the right choice. But I think in 2015, the issue of rotation was a major issue.
Yes.
And most of these people from the northern part of the country, our brothers, they supported the idea that power had to go to the north, when Jonathan was the president. So I don't know what has happened now, that paradigm had to shift. There's a paradigm shift from say, okay, we don't want, it doesn't make any sense. Whereas 6 years ago, it made a lot of sense.
One of the important things is actually the issue of the economy. The economy has continued to show problems in the country. The Buhari administration, for instance, is doing a lot of work in infrastructure. Yeah. And I don't think we have had, in spite of all the criticisms of the Buhari administration, I don't think we have had an administration that has focused and actually executed infrastructure work as the Buhari administration has done. Usually you expect that with this kind of infrastructure pool, or the infrastructure work, that it will also engender a lot of economic activity. And we are waiting for that to happen. But as we stand, the economy is not strong. What has been the problem with handling our economy?
I think the problem is over-concentration of the political economy. We should allow 1,000 ideas to blossom, like the Chinese would say. The federal government is having monopoly over so many economic indices. Yes. So we are talking about control of ports. We are talking about control of railways. We are talking about control of energy. Even though we have privatized, the federal government is still in control of transmission. So the federal government needs to hands off a lot of infrastructure. Even we are talking about oil management. There's no reason why Delta State cannot have, be allowed to manage its oil, and then they can build refineries. You cannot say, okay, every resources in Niger Delta, you have to manage it from Abuja. It's wrong. So we have a stifled system that does not allow people to realize their potentials, to develop. So we need to allow communities, we need to allow states, to take, if you want to register a company, it takes a long time. So when they want to set up let's say a refinery in Delta State, you have to pass through the Ministry of Finance, this, that, all sort of bureaucracy. And if you are not careful, three years, you are still on it.
And then somebody can come and stop.
Yes, you want to build airport, you need a license, you need to go to. So the federal government is not giving room for Nigerians, states and communities to realize their potentials. So we need to, the federal government needs to hands off a lot of economic programs so that, the states can be allowed to take more initiatives.
But we cannot resolve that unless we go back to the Constitution
yes,
again,
yes.
and say, okay, we don't want states that will be relying every month on federal allocations alone, because that is what we have now, except a few states who have great IGR like Lagos,